As an animation fan, nothing is more painful than the phrases all animation is the same or animation is a kid's thing. Like, honestly, even these wide varieties of death scenes along multiple different animation styles aren't as painful as this phrase. While it is painful, though, I do partially kind of agree with a certain aspect of it. I'll get onto it. And that small aspect of it being right is what's the most painful of all. So, in another video, I talked more about why lots of animation has been made to be family friendly, or as people like to call them, being films that are made for kids. But the thing that some people overlook or forget about when they say animation is for kids is that there are just so many films under so many various genres and even animation styles. Also, there are films and more so TV shows that aren't suitable for kids at all. So that statement is basically straight out the window. You can't say the Care Bears is the same as Tuca and Bertie. Here's the issue though. Unfortunately for some adults or even older kids, just the mere fact that many younger kids enjoy the same medium is off putting to them. Or at least that's kind of the vibe that I get. I could literally go off on an entire tangent about psychology behind some people instinctively wanting to show that they're grown up and want to have a clear transition between childhood and adulthood. But I'm sure you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You might even feel it yourself. I mean, the want to drop kid stuff doesn't just stop at films. Some adults are even put off by certain types of foods that are considered to be for kids. Like Munch Bunches come to mind. I mean, they're smaller and the packaging doesn't look boring, but the thing is just a yogurt at the end of the day, and a nice tasting one at that. There's nothing about a yogurt that's inherently only for kids. It's just a case of wanting to say, I'm mature now.
You see, all this stuff that kids do, like laser tag and, I don't know, eating munch bunches, going on climbing frames. I don't do that stuff anymore. Of course, I don't do that stuff anymore. That's all kid stuff. I only like stuff like golf and, taxes and Financial Times and all that stuff now. And I'm not talking about the crazy type of golf. Obviously, that type of golf is too immature, and I'm too intellectually intellectual for that. I only like boring stuff now.
And society in general just doesn't help much either, with us often saying, for example, that Legos are a kid's thing, even though there are some amazing adult Lego builders out there. Even though it is getting better, there is still very much a divide. And by the way, I'm not hating on people that genuinely don't enjoy those things anymore, other than laser tag. I mean, the sound that you get when you hit somebody followed by the ow is too darn satisfying. What I am saying is that people shouldn't just ditch stuff because they've reached an arbitrary age. And society shouldn't stop people who still enjoy those things. You know, I personally don't really care for climbing frames. I totally could though, but if I just set off in the park and went for a climbing frame, I'd probably get some confused looks. Probably from the same people who wouldn't bat an eye at people going for this adult glorified climbing frame that I've been on before. As a society, we've made stuff like that weird, and at this point, just as we've done with so many other things, we've got an image of what an adult should look like, and anything outside of that is made to seem weird or childish or immature. There are so many reasons that societal norms suck, but I'm just gonna leave it there. I don't want to make the whole video about societal norms. Why I am saying all this though is that I think this is happening with animation. People grew up with animation, so for a lot of people, it's one of those things that you have to ditch to go from being labeled as a child to being labeled as an adult. That's why, even though I know that many people don't mean it this way, I do have an issue with a lot of family animation that is made for a general audience to enjoy being labeled as kids' films as opposed to family films. Just like most adults wouldn't fit into kids' clothes, this labeling to me could give people the impression that these films are films that would only be fitting for kids. And yes, as I said before, I do realize that many of the people that say this don't mean that, but I feel like some other people may not understand it in the intended way. I just don't think that it gives the right impression about these films. Let's take The Prince of Egypt, for example. On Google Play, it's labeled as a 6 to 12 kids film, which is blatantly meaning that it is a kids film in that intended way, which is quite frankly insulting, but I'm not even going to go there. As a 6 to 12-year-old, there's a lot in this film that would go way over a kid's head. In case you haven't seen The Prince of Egypt, which what you do and you should see it, this is basically the story of Moses that is told very similarly across different religions. Moses, adopted by the Egyptian ruling class, stands up against the pharaoh when he gets older and demands that he lets the slaves go, and tells the pharaoh to stop considering himself a god and basically puts him down from his high horse, quite literally at one point. While that may seem like a relatively simple premise, I mean, we're not talking Inception level complexity here, the story does still have a lot of depth to it. For example, while the pharaoh is clearly doing the wrong thing by not letting the slaves go during the plague, 6 to 12-year-olds might just think that it's because he's bad. But as adults, from personal experience, we start to understand why he's doing what he's doing. He's not just being bad because he's just plainly a bad guy, but he's doing bad things because he was doubted by his father growing up and wants to prove himself, and also wants to uphold the traditions that his family has been following for generations. You may be able to start understanding this as a child, unlikely as a freaking 6 to 12-year-old though, but I feel like with some of the deeper meanings in this film, you'll only really start to relate to it properly as an adult who is held up to those higher standards for yourself, and maybe not, God status, but you have expected to do more than you are expected to do as a child. So yeah, by this, I am not saying that there aren't any kids films out there. There are both animated as well as non-animated ones that are out there that I don't think have much in them for adults. For example, while I haven't seen it for myself, I highly doubt the Paw Patrol film will have gotten past many surface level themes that would have been easily understandable by kids. But if it is the case that Paw Patrol does just have surface level things, I would be more okay with calling it a kids film, because chances are it's just going to be them that would really appreciate it. But labeling less audience focused animated films as kids films can leave a lot of films without the audience that they deserve. For example, the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse film, amazing film by the way, had the lowest box office out of all of the Spider-Man films, even though now it's considered by many to be an amazing film, and has actually become some people's favourite Spider-Man film. So, golf playing, weightlifting person who enjoys managing their taxes, you can now go out and see it without lowering your social status.
Ooh, that is splendid. I'm gonna go tomorrow.
Many other mostly indie films, though, don't get the same level of attention, which is a shame. As funny as it may sound, I've actually seen this carry over to actual adult comedy. For starters, for some reason that I can only really think is because they showed it around dinner time on TV, the vibe that I get from people about The Simpsons is that it's considered to be a show for kids to watch. Even though I feel it contains a lot of inappropriate things for younger kids, and I have no doubt in my mind that if this show wasn't bright and colourful, and more specifically wasn't animated, parents would have been way more hesitant to show it to their kids. I mean, even Disney has no issue showing it right at the front of Disney Plus. Also, other adult shows that are very much adult shows can be lumped under this too, which can actually be quite bad for some kids. But I could see people who just lump all animated films and TV shows under an umbrella, perhaps coming across a fun looking show with a big horse in a big house and think that it's okay. But next thing you know, characters are saying to suck a certain body part, and there are dolphin pole dancers dancing erotically on the screen. This obviously isn't really that appropriate for kids, especially if you don't see that first and you see Tuca and Bertie first. I mean, that's a bit too much even for me. Also, I always feel like I have to say this when I talk about BoJack Horseman. Despite some bits of my asexual brain wanting me to skip certain parts of this show, adults are really missing out from great representation for certain groups to hilarious satire and some very clever world building with BoJack Horseman. This is a great show, and it's just so annoying that some people can't look past the label or God forbid, consider animation a genre. But as I said at the start of this video, they also aren't entirely wrong about animation being a lot of the same, but they are very much making an overgeneralization. I would say that a lot of Western animated films do follow certain cliches, and those cliches in many ways are only being done more and more as time goes on. For example, way too many animated films have animal sidekicks or just some kind of sidekick for comic relief in general. These comic relief sidekicks don't really do anything else other than just make jokes and try to be funny, even though for the most part they often aren't funny. Most times, lots of them just end up being an annoying, hyperactive waffler who just grinds the story to a halt to spout out some nonsense. But then, even for that, not all of them are bad. I mean, I actually really like Olaf, for example. But the fact that there are so many of these sidekicks in most of the popular animated films definitely helps to support this blanket statement that all animation is the same. Thankfully, though, this isn't always the case. A film that I thought was brilliant was Don Bluth's A Land Before Time, because this film wasn't scared to make a gloomy, very sad film that directly talks about grieving for a dead loved one and doesn't feel like it has to be all bright and colourful like many other animated films are. This is a film where it made sense to go dark and gloomy, and that's why it and other Don Bluth films went for that look. In this film, there are funny characters, but there aren't any that I would consider to be a direct sidekick who is just there for the laughs. The characters in that film all play a part and are all well developed in of themselves. And on the topic of characters, Hollywood, what's up with almost every single protagonist in your animated films being teens, and so many of the stories being coming of age films? And I'm saying this as someone who is a big fan of coming of age films. It's one of my favorite types of films, but that does not mean that almost every single one of your films should be a coming of age film or have child protagonists. You might be thinking that they do this because kids will be able to find it easier to get behind other kids in a film, but while this may be the case sometimes, I also really beg to differ. Let's start by looking at it from the other side. Jojo Rabbit, an extremely funny satire by the ever-extravagant Taika Waititi. Jojo Rabbit's protagonist is a young boy called Roman Griffin Davis, and he is a kid actor, yet lots of adults could get behind Jojo and could empathize with him. Or there's the massively successful series that I haven't actually watched for myself called Stranger Things, and this show has a whole cast of kid actors. As I said, I haven't watched it, but I know a lot of people like this show. So while less of these types of shows come to mind, where the protagonist's age isn't in line with the main target audience, there are actually some examples from the other side too. Some animated films also have adult protagonists too. For example, in Monsters Inc., Sully and Mike are in their late 20s. Moses in The Prince of Egypt is in his 20s too, even though he was older in religious scriptures, but they took some creative liberties with this film. And there's also Shrek, whose age I don't know, but he's way too bitter about everything to not at least be the generation before boomers. And Pixar even actually had an actual boomer in one of their films too. So yeah, it can actually be done, and the films could still end up being beloved films. But for some reason, Hollywood just doesn't want to do that for more animated films. And there are so many other cliches out there. With all these cliches and other issues that these films have, I'm not at all saying that Western animation is without fault. But then, neither are live action films. Jump scares, unnecessary sex scenes, and lack of character development, for example, are an issue in many live action films. And while we're on the topic of live action, where do we even draw the line with animation? Ready Player One, for example, was half in a live action world and half in an animated world. And sure, you can say, well, the characters aren't always animated, so that doesn't count. But then, where do you put films such as Dinosaur and Disney's recent Hamlet-inspired National Geographic feature-length film? Both of these films happen to be in the real world, but all of the characters are CGI. And then there are Marvel films that are basically half CGI with all of the special effects that they have. Did they count as animated films? If you then say animated films should have nothing live action in them, well, okay then, what about the Lego movie? It had a live action segment in it, and that is still considered an animated film. I may be playing devil's advocate here, but here's the thing. What should you expect if you say a generalized annoying statement like animated films are just for kids? Well, you're gonna get an annoying comment back that proves you wrong. The line between animated films and live action films nowadays is just so blurry that it's just really annoying that people still want to fully distinguish between them and say that one film is like one thing and another film is like another. The mediums are just so blurred right now. Wait though, did you think I was going to just stop at Hollywood animation? Oh no, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about foreign films, indie films, and anime. So what I've noticed about anime is it's in this really weird spot. I'd say alongside Western adult animation. Some people are too much like our golf playing, managing taxes loving friend over here to admit that they could enjoy watching an animated film.
Me watching anime? How dare you create such a preposterous thought in your mind? I would not watch that childish drivel.
But these shows are also clearly 18 rated and have all of the aspects of an 18 rated show, just being told through a different medium. If they aren't gruesome or sexual, some of these shows are filled with themes and plot points that even went over my head, let alone a child's. In the world of anime, this argument just falls apart immediately. You can try and say,
Well, I know what I said before, and I know all of it isn't PG. It's even the 18 stuff is still for kids, though. And okay, you know what? It's just different.
but anime literally just means Japanese animation. Again, if you think it is a separate thing and have a section of anime you want to make a point about, stop being so generic with your statement and say exactly what you don't like about what type of animation. Then there's foreign films, or basically non-Hollywood films. The Breadwinner is a brilliant film that is an example of this, that is very hard to watch at times, that I would say is much more for an adult audience than a kid's audience. Same thing with My Life as a Zucchini by writer and director Celine Sciamma, who also wrote and directed the brilliant film Tomboy and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. She is known for her minimalist, fly on the wall style of filmmaking, with that same style being in My Life as a Zucchini. I'd imagine that kids would have been bored out of their minds watching it, especially since there's not a lot of action and lots of the things in the film are things that adults would understand and relate to a lot more than kids would. So yeah, I know, I might be seeming like I'm just rambling and ranting, but what I really want to emphasize, and I feel like I say this a lot for things, is that you cannot just say that animation is this, or live action is this, or animation is for this audience, and live action is for this other audience. Because evidently saying any of those things is quite clearly just not true. In fact, this is one of the reasons I started this channel and wanted to focus on animation, even though there are many live action films I could also be talking about. I'm honestly just kind of fed up of people trying to box animation into being a kid's thing, or being a lesser art form, or being something that is all the same, because they've only watched mediocre at best Illumination films. Because it quite evidently isn't a lesser art form. There are some incredibly talented artists out there who build weird and wonderful worlds, and weird and wonderful characters, whether that's by hand or in real life for stop motion. And they really deserve more respect for their work, not just from the general public, but from, well, Disney too. I go on about The Lion King so much more than Disney's other remakes, because honestly, making that remake is such a morally low point for Disney, I feel. With other Disney remakes, yes, they may be unnecessary for the most part, but at least they have real people in them and have tried to add some new elements to the film. But in the quote unquote live action remake for The Lion King, that is actually mostly animation, there is literally no excuse to remake it, with it having almost exactly the same story as before. All it does is give the impression to regular viewers that the old version needed improving, and this is the improvement. If they came out and told an entirely different story, or even just had a different spin on The Lion King in the remake, I would have been totally fine with that being a thing. Heck, if you're going to make it look like a National Geographic documentary, why not make it a National Geographic documentary about lions? It's not as if Disney doesn't own National Geographic now too. My big issue with it too is that it's helping to only make the division of people thinking animation is for kids and live action is for adults bigger. Collectively, as customers, we have the power, at least in non monopolistic and infrastructural businesses. In businesses that aren't those businesses, the only way companies are going to do something is if they get enough demand, which then leads to profit for it. Otherwise, they'll just be wasting their money. So, a big way to tell a company that you don't want their product is by not buying it. And if enough people do this, they might change their ways. I do have to admit though that I didn't think I'd like anime just a few years ago, mainly because I generalized it too. And I did actually fall for the minions, and I did used to like them at one point, which is kind of a big reason why I don't like them at all now. And I'm kind of annoyed that I like them. But now that I'm more kind of open to new things and I'm a bit less impressed by simplistic looking minion people, I have given anime a chance. And one of my favorite films now is actually an anime because I gave it a go. I've also been watching a wide range of films with my friends recently, and some of those are really old films that I never thought I'd enjoy, but they were pretty great for the most part. I'm not saying that everyone has to love all of animation, because even I don't like every animated thing out there, not by a long shot. And that's nothing different than me not liking every live action film out there. But what I'm just saying is to try different things and explore. Who knows, maybe if you stop thinking of animation as being all the same or just a kids thing, maybe you'll find your favorite and least favorite film within it. And if you don't, that's totally okay too. If you want to see my videos early and want to see some behind the scenes stuff that goes into making my videos, please consider checking out my Patreon in the description down below. And what I'd love to see in the description is you all commenting the animated films that you've seen that you like the most. And feel free to check out each other's suggestions too. For now though, thanks for watching, stay safe everyone, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.